Hey everybody, welcome to Between Two Pastries. Today we have one of our interns, Nicole Miller, and she so graciously put together an excellent presentation for us around menopause and dairy. There's a lot of hype around dairy. Annie and I have talked about this a lot, and there have been some very, very strong studies that have come out specifically around menopause and dairy. So I had asked Nicole if she would want to do some more research around this and put together a presentation for all of us. And she said, yes. So that's so wonderful. Nicole, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, go for it, girl.
All right. So as Nicole mentioned, we're going to be doing this whole presentation on menopause and its relationship to dairy. So first, what is menopause? It's a point in time 12 months after a woman's last menstrual cycle. And the menopause transition is typically between ages 45 and 55 and can last anywhere from 7 to 14 years on average. The menopause transition varies woman to woman. And after menopause, women are more vulnerable to diseases like heart disease and osteoporosis. Some of the common symptoms around menopause are hot flashes, vaginal and urinary problems, irregular periods or bleeding, sleep problems, mood, memory issues, depression and anxiety, and changing feelings about sex. Some of the topics that we'll move this down a little bit. Some of the topics that we'll cover today is dairy healthy? Some of the myths and facts on dairy. Can it be beneficial to menopause? And what if I don't or can't eat dairy? So just a quick overview on the nutrients of dairy. One glass typically has about 8 grams of protein, 25% of your daily intake of calcium, which helps with building strong bones and teeth, 20% of phosphorus, 20% of your daily intake of phosphorus, which helps with strengthening bones, 20% of pantothenic acid, which helps converting food into energy, 15% of your vitamin A intake, which promotes good vision and healthy skin, 35% of your riboflavin, which supports body growth, red blood cell production, and metabolism, 15% of your vitamin D intake, which helps promote the absorption of calcium, 8% of potassium, which regulates fluid balance and helps maintain normal blood pressure, and 10% of your daily niacin intake, which promotes proper circulation. Now, consuming dairy products can provide you with numerous health benefits, and it is especially important for building and maintaining strong bones. It's rich in vitamins and minerals, like I just mentioned, specifically in those of calcium and vitamin D, which help with bone health and the prevention of osteoporosis.
I think what's really important to just kind of note in general, because of the fact that we as women actually stop building bone at the age of 25, what's really important is that we fight to maintain what we've built. And so we have increased needs for calcium in 2 stages of our life. In early stage of our life, and then in this menopausal and then postmenopausal stage in our life too. It kind of goes to this. It's like both of the same, right? We go down a little bit in our childbearing years, but we go back up again in postmenopausal. And so it's just really important that we help support our bones as much as possible, even though we can't build. We've got to make sure that we have enough to support that structure that's already there. And so some of these things that Nicole are talking about, the vitamin D specifically, the phosphorus, even vitamin K, which we haven't mentioned yet, all help to keep that calcium getting absorbed to support those bones too. So it's just important that we keep looking at that. We can't ignore it. And there's so many people who are not consuming dairy anymore, but then what we're finding is, they're not taking in enough calcium. And in particular, during a time when we don't have estrogen that supports our bone, we don't have that help anymore. So we have to start looking and doing things more manually. So it's just really important for that aspect.
And so now we'll go into some of the studies that actually talk a little bit more about this. So one of the studies about the benefits of menopause or postmenopausal women associated with dairy looked at over 35,000 women, which is a huge study. And these women were all postmenopausal. And they found that the higher intake of dairy, with the exception of butter, was associated with lower triglyceride levels, lower total cholesterol, favorable insulin response, and positive inflammatory biomarkers. So really, really good study showing some of the benefits more specifically on cardiovascular health associated with dairy products.
And that's so important, in particular with the lower triglyceride concentrations too, because I think most people associate consuming dairy in general with having higher, and most people are trying to lower lipid values in some respect, as well as increasing insulin response. So these are just really, really huge findings in general, because again, with the loss of estrogen, we do not have as great of an ability to naturally help ourselves with that. So it's just such a strong study in general. So thank you for that.
And in another study, which was really recent, 2021, they studied the effects of dairy on human bones compared to that of plant milks. They analyzed the effects of gut microbiome too, and found that the intake of milk and dairy products is beneficial for every age group in terms of bone mass development due to the high bioavailability of calcium, vitamin D, and protein in particular found in those dairy products. They found that there's a beneficial connection of the gut microbiome due to the consumption of dairy products, which also can help with increasing that calcium absorption and the production of the short chain, that's supposed to say fatty acids, and serotonin.
Yeah, and that's also, again, super huge. And for those that aren't familiar with what serotonin is, it does help us actually be able to sleep. It also helps us dealing with stress. And so often, again, we lose that estrogen, we lose a few bearings here. So we've got to really start looking at how we can help balance ourselves out as much as possible. And consuming foods that help us decrease cortisol levels in our body and increase serotonin is number one. And so for this study to actually find that dairy does this over plant-based milks is astounding, to be honest. I personally, I can't do dairy. I'm actually allergic to the whey. So, I see this and it makes me feel sad because it's like, dang it, I have to keep doing all the other things that I'm doing to help kind of counteract that. But again, an excellent study.
So now we'll go into some of the myths that are out there about dairy and what the actual facts are in relation to those. So the first myth is dairy is high in fat and sugar. Now, some dairy is high fat and sugar. There's flavored yogurts, things like that typically are higher in the sugar content, or there's higher fat dairy products as well. But naturally, dairy isn't truly high in either of those. For example, 100 grams of whole milk only contains about 3.5 grams of fat and about 4.8 grams of sugar. So the big thing with that is you want to make sure that you're looking at the ingredients in relation to the dairy product that you're using.
And what's important to know, but what's important to note about that, and people also seem to not understand that, when Nicole's talking about sugar, she's just talking about lactose. And so it's not added sugar. So there's not added anything in milk in general. It's just simply the naturally occurring carbohydrate that you'll find in milk, which is lactose. So higher the fat content, lower the actual lactose. in the product versus say a 2%, 1%, or skim.
Now, another myth is that dairy cows are full of antibiotics. And as of 2017, the majority of the antibiotics are prohibited unless deemed medically necessary by a vet. And then in these cases, the cow and her milk are actually separated until the antibiotic has fully left her system. So there's no antibiotics getting through the milk into our consumption.
I think that's awesome to know and understand.
Yeah, there's also some things that I looked at in relation to hormones, and there's a lot of steps that dairy farmers are doing to now become more transparent with what they're feeding the cows and all this stuff. So there's a lot of really good information and good motion forward towards sharing the information with the public of how the milk is treated, I guess is the best way to say it.
No, that's awesome. That's so awesome.
Now, big topic is gut health, and a lot of people think dairy is bad for your gut health. Now, there's growing research that supports the role of diet and gut health overall, and this includes the role of fermentable products, and fermented dairy in particular can have a very positive impact on gut microbiome, kind of like what we just talked about with the serotonin in the last study. And studies have noted that following yogurt consumption specifically, there's a slight increase in the microbial diversity and increase of beneficial gut bacteria. And that would be quality yogurt, not the flavored candy yogurts.
Right, or the ones that have like the artificial sweeteners in it.
Yes.
Things like that. Like we're talking about it, the true product of a yogurt. Kefir as well is probably one of the highest probiotic containing, dairy sources out there. It's beyond crazy how much is in there. So it's wonderful.
Now, some other myths associated with dairy is one that it's just not environmentally friendly compared to its alternatives. And plant milks are often looked at as the healthier and more environmentally friendly option. But all food production comes with an environmental footprint, and it's impossible to declare just one type of food product the best because they're all grown, produced, and distributed in different ways. In particular, I know almond milk, which is great to have, but in California, there's a lot of issues with its pulling water and aiding in the drought crisis. So it just has different environmental footprints depending on which source of milk or milk alternative that you're using. Another fact or myth is that milk allergy and intolerances are the same thing. So Nicole was mentioning her milk allergy, which is very different than just an intolerance. So allergies are hypersensitivity reactions of the immune system. And intolerances are just the discomfort to a food or food component due to the body's inability to digest and absorb food effectively. So people tend to have a lactose intolerance or a actual milk allergy to the protein in milk. And then the last myth I have is that dairy is a bad idea for everybody. So many diets in today's world focus on elimination versus variety. So i.e. dairy, we assume, or we're going to eliminate dairy, and now we assume that it's bad because this diet has eliminated it. But we want to look at the food for what it is. And dairy contains so many nutrients that help and maintain health. And people may not want to have dairy for a variety of reasons, for ethical, religious, personal, or an allergy. But you can't make the claim that it's not beneficial. And there's just not research to back that up.
You got it.
Now, finally, so there are people who just can't have dairy or who don't like dairy, and that's okay. Now, in looking at what options we have, this doesn't go the full picture, so it's not going to look at all those other benefits. This is specifically focusing on the main components. So for individuals who choose dairy alternatives, fortified soy milk and yogurt have the calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin D added and are included in part of the dairy group. So soy milk is a great alternative in that aspect. But other milks may contain calcium, but they're not included in the dairy component because they're not fully similar. So an oat milk or an almond milk isn't nutritionally a comparable swap. But if you want to do that, that's fine. You just got to look at other ways to improve some calcium in your diet, improve some of those other vitamins and minerals that dairy has. And some ways that you can do that to improve your calcium are adding in like fortified juices or calcium fortified plant milk. So looking for those things. Adding in canned fish, tofu made with calcium sulfate, tahini is great, or even just adding in some leafy greens can really help boost that bioavailability of vitamins and minerals in your diet. That is all I have on dairy and menopause, but there's a lot of upcoming research that people are really focusing on including dairy back into their diet, not only for menopause, but for gut health and for so many other health benefits.
That's awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much for that additional research. Really appreciate it. And I love how things are progressing as well. Like you mentioned, like the farmers becoming more transparent. We're being more, proactive around what is happening with dairy and why it is still an excellent choice for people. So anyway, Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of course.